Hello everyone, Kristina Werner here. Welcome to another video. Today I'm taking a look at the Sneak Peek Club from Waffle Flower. This is the kit number 4, so these are actually products that are coming out in their May release. But if you join their Sneak Peek Club, you can get a few of the May release items before everyone else. So inside this little pouch, we have a couple of die sets and some sentiment strips. Let's take a look at the first die set. This is the Birthday Balloons die set, and I really love this large open balloon shape. It's going to be great. And then also we have the balloon ties dies. So I'm going to first start by creating a 5x7 card. Now this balloon here is sized that it would be, just about perfect if you wanted to use it for an A2 sized card and have the balloon itself be the shaped card. But it's also sized really perfectly to really fill the entire space of a 5x7 card. So I've used my die cutting machine and cut out the balloon. And then my idea is to have a really colorful shaker area behind the balloon. So I've picked out 4 different colors of ink, and I'm ink blending those onto the center of this piece of white cardstock. At this point, my cardstock is 5x7, so it is the exact size of my card. But when I go to put this together, I'm actually going to trim down this back wall of my shaker so that it doesn't show or peek out from behind the shaker itself when you tip the card. It'll make more sense as we get going here. And as I'm doing my blending, I'm pausing every once in a while and bringing that balloon die cut window over to my blended piece just to check to see how my blended area is looking. I'm using some Waffle Flower blending brushes to bring in these colorful inks. And as the inks overlap, I'm going to get additional colors. So as this yellow and blue overlap, I'm getting a little hint of green. And as the purple and red overlap, I'm getting a more intense red violet and things like that. I love ink blending with colors like this because you can really maximize on the amount of color that is shown on your project. I'm going to add a few more bits of blending in here. I just want to make sure I'm filling each area and then bringing that balloon over to check how much of that space is being filled. It's looking pretty good. So I'm just going to fill in a couple last few gaps. I'm going to check one more time, and then I'm going to call it a day when it comes to this blended piece. So I actually went and I trimmed it down, like I mentioned. I just took 1/8 of an inch off each side, and then I'm going to be adhering it to a already prepared 5x7 card base. So I'm putting some adhesive on the back. I'm just using some Tombow Extreme adhesive, and this is going to hold it to my card base so that I can create my shaker card. After I had my blended piece down onto my card front, so that's the back wall of the shaker, I'm now going to prepare the actual shaker itself. I'm using some liquid glue to adhere a piece of acetate to the back of my die cut window. And this is just some really strong acetate. I'm going to put that directly over the top of that balloon. And this is just cut to a little bit smaller than my 5x7 card front. Now I'm going to use the 1/8 inch thick foam strips from Waffle Flower. And these are really great. The foam strips actually come in a couple of depths. This is the one that's deeper. And I picked this one in particular because I want there to be plenty of room for all of the little bits inside my shaker to move around freely. So I'm picking up one of the thicker pieces and I'm removing the backer piece or the release paper. And that makes it so it's very flexible and I can manipulate it around the shape of my shaker window. In this case, it's a balloon. I use this same method when I do circle windows or even squares because I find it easier to use one long strip of foam adhesive versus many small little bits of foam adhesive. So going around this balloon was just about perfect with 3 long strips. I did have to cut a tiny little bit here at the end just to close up that gap around the bottom of the balloon. And then to finish off the shaker area, I need to add foam adhesive to the remaining corners. If you think about it, this is going to go down directly onto the card front. So I want to make sure there aren't any saggy areas that might get indented when I put this card through the mail. So I put a bunch of foam adhesive down, and then now I'm going to start putting the shaker together. I'm going to use my Misty Stamp Positioning tool, but only because I want to use that corner. You could also use the corner of a score pal or even a T-square ruler. I just wanted a corner to nestle that corner into so that it would hold it in place and it would be easier to line up my card front. I'm removing the release paper from all of the foam tape, and then I'm going to place my shaker down into the corner of my Misty. And then I'm going to take my sequin bits, and today I'm using a mix from Lucy's Cards. This is the Razzle Dazzle mix, just a nice colorful mix of sequins. And I'm putting that down into the center of the shaker area. And sometimes I'm not quite sure how many sequins to use, if that's enough or not enough. So I'm going to pick this up carefully and put my blended piece behind it just to kind of get an idea. Is that enough? And I decided it probably was. So I'm going to turn my blended card base over on itself face down and then line it up in the corner of my Misty and then press that down. Using the corner of my Misty makes this really, really easy. So I'm running my fingertips over that, making sure it adheres completely to that card base. And then I can flip it over and see how it all turned out. And I think this was the perfect amount of sequins. Not too much, not too little. Leaves enough coverage open so that you can really see that blended piece in the background. I'm now using the balloon ties die, and I'm going to use a bit of holographic cardstock to cut out this balloon tie. And this just gives it a little bit of shine, a little bit of a colorful shimmer onto the string of the balloon. So I added some liquid glue onto the string for the balloon and then adhered that directly over the top. And this is going to hang off the end of the card. So after that's dry, I'll eventually cut off the tip. So now I'm using the sentiment strips that come in the Sneak Peek Club. And these are pre-cut. The black ones are pre-cut. So I'm going through with my scissors and just smoothing out the sides because you do have a little bit of those connectors left behind. So I'm just using my scissors to cut off those edges and make it nice and perfect. And then I'm adhering the sentiment strips to a piece of holographic cardstock. This is just going to give another instance of that holographic finish. So you have it in a couple places on the card. And I'm adhering these to two different edges on the holographic cardstock. And then I'm going to trim them down using a mini trimmer. And this is a great way to add a little bit of spacing around each of the sentiment strips, make them a little bit more substantial. And it just looks really, really nice with a border around the sentiment strip. It gives it just a little bit of a different look. So I'm going to adhere these sentiment strips directly to my card front using some glue. I considered using more foam adhesive, but I decided that since my card was already fairly thick, I didn't want to add any pieces on top. Now, that is until I started thinking about, more sequins coming out on the outside of the balloon would look amazing. So I did end up adding some more thickness to the card by adhering a bunch of the sequins on the outside of the shaker as well. It gives the illusion of those party confetti bits coming out of the area, and it really does look like it's party time to me. So I used some liquid glue to adhere each one of these sequins and just took my time as I went around and added them all around that balloon. So balloons, just as a shape itself, are really great for shaker cards. So I couldn't leave this at just one shaker card with that die set. I knew that I would need to create another shaker card. So after I finished this first one with a very, very large balloon shape right in the center, I decided, you know what, there are 3 more balloon dies in that die set. Let's make a smaller card, or rather some smaller shakers. So for the second card, I'm going to do the ink blended piece and have that be the front panel of my shaker area. So this card is going to have a lot of color on it. And then I'm going to be using the 3 balloon dies, and I'm going to have all 3 balloons cut out and be separate shakers. using those same inks that I used before just to add a bunch of blended areas onto this cardstock. This cardstock is cut to 4¼ by 5½, so it is the exact size of my card front. So I'm adding on a little bit more of that. And then there's my blended piece. So I'm going to add a little bit of water droplets to this. The ink I use is water reactive, so this is going to kind of wick away and leave water droplets. Sprinkling that on. And after I had the water droplets, I decided I wanted a little bit more texture, even more texture than what's already there. So I'm actually going to bring in some white paint splatter. And I'm going to create the paint splatter by using some white gouache. So this is my method for adding paint splatter onto backgrounds or projects. I like to put the paint on an acrylic block, and I'll dilute the paint just a little bit just so that it's more fluid. And then I'm using a paintbrush to run off the edge of my block and splatter right onto my project. I find I have a little bit more control over where the splatter goes when I use this method. It's a little bit less messy. So I splattered all of that on, making sure to get all of those areas. And then I let this dry completely before moving on with it. And I'm just cutting it out using those dies. So now I have 3 glitter strings to go with my really cute balloons. And I'm positioning the balloons directly on my card front. I thought it'd be kind of nice to have an arrangement where it's big, medium, small. And I'm going to pull that small balloon over just a tiny bit so it's not perfectly in the center. And then I'm going to put these strings on just to give myself an idea. Like, is this enough space that these strings could go on my card front? It looks perfect. I love these curly Q strings. I think they're so whimsical. So I'll run that through my die cutting machine. And then I'm left with 3 balloons that I can actually use for a different project. So I'll just set the balloons aside for a different project. And now I'm doing the shaker. I trimmed down my ink blended piece to be a little bit smaller. And I also cut out some more glitter cardstock to be the back wall of my shaker. So now I'm going to build my shaker elements similar to what I did on the first card. I first took some acetate and adhered that directly to my shaker area. Then I grabbed some of the more narrow foam strips. Again, this is the 1/8 inch depth foam. And I used the thinner, more narrow strips so that I could put the foam in between the balloons. So this is going to give a very contained look for all of the sequins. And I wanted to do it this way so that, if the shaker was turned or tilted, not all the shaker bits would fall to just one balloon down at the bottom. I wanted each balloon to have its own area. I then went around that area with some plain straight foam strips. And my acetate was cut to the same size as my glitter cardstock, which is the back wall of my shaker. So I knew exactly where to put the remainder of the foam strips around the balloons. I removed all of the release paper, and then I'm using some sequins. And these are just some crystal clear confetti sequins. And I'm putting those directly inside each one of these balloons and kind of spreading them out to make sure that I have enough sequins within each shape. I then grabbed the back of my shaker, which is that glitter cardstock, and pressed that down directly over all of that foam tape. Running my fingers over each area, making sure it gets a nice adhesion to that glitter paper. And then I'm going to tip this back over and I'll see how all those shaker bits turned out. So pretty. I love it. It just looks like a party on a card. Perfect for a birthday card. So then I grabbed additional foam tape and I put foam all over the rest of this design so that when I adhere it to my card, everything is nice and sturdy and I don't have any sagging areas. I put a little bit of regular tape runner adhesive on the back of the glitter paper. And then I put it directly onto a prepared A2 sized card front, putting that right there in the center. Only a few things left to do to finish off this card. I'm now going to take those glitter balloon ties and I'm going to adhere them directly onto the card. Now, a couple of these were too long. I wanted to really preserve that curly Q area at the bottom of the die cut. So I cut off the top end of these shapes and put it directly below the balloon, just so it could kind of retain all of the really cute curly Q areas. And then for the ones that hung off the end, I did cut those off with some scissors. I adhered some white sentiment strips this time that I've cut down, and I adhered those directly to the card fronts. I didn't want any additional bulk, and I just used some liquid glue for that. To finish off this card, I did grab a few sequins and put those outside of the balloons. I decided I really loved that sequin on the outside of the shaker look from the first card, and I thought I would mimic that on the second card. So I used some more liquid glue to adhere these confetti sequins. Okay, so that is 2 inspiration ideas for the Sneak Peek Club from Waffle Flower. These products will be available outside of the Sneak Peek Club on May 5th. So if by chance you don't get the Sneak Peek Club in time, no worries. You can pick up these balloon dies and the strings and even the sentiment strips in the normal Waffle Flower release on May 5th. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you guys in another video very soon.